Welcome to the JVB Productions R1200LC Rallye Bodywork and Tank Removal and Installation video. If you're interested in the video that includes the air filter change, look on my YouTube channel. Standard disclaimer. This video is for the 2017 BMW R1200GS Rallye. First we're going to start removing the rear rack, which begins with removing the seat.
Taking the front seat off?
Pardon the extraneous conversation. These bolts come with a Loctite already installed. Sometimes they're really difficult to take off. Just be careful and be consistent when you're pulling on them. All of the bolts are T40s. These two are down inside of the pockets. If you're just doing this for a short-term removal, just leave the bolts in so you don't get them confused which one goes where. The rear cover is also T40, same 4 bolts, and also can be difficult to remove. Once you get the last bolt out, leave all of the 4 bolts and all 4 bushings in place so you don't get them confused. Note that the front bolts and bushings are longer than the rear bolts and bushings. Now you have full access for rear lights, wiring, and fuse blocks. Next we remove all the tank panels. This is a factory tank bag strap. It just unclips. Now remove the seat adjuster. Every single body screw is a T25 Torx except one at the top of the tank. Please pay close attention to whether these screws that you're removing have a shank or no shank. It does make a difference when you're reinstalling them. This is the front of the center tank panel. Only that very middle one there is the T30 Torx. All of the rest of them are T25. If you're doing this on the center stand, you can turn the handlebars and use a regular size screwdriver tip instead. Underneath each of these screws is a little plastic washer. It's clear and it's really easy to miss. This is the one T30 Torx I was telling you about. It can be a little bit fidgety to get out of there. Here you can see that plastic washer.
That's good. As long as you hear it hit the floor. You can
lift from the back and the center panel just pops right off. From here on out, I'm only going to show you one side. The other side is exactly the same. These little side panels just pop right off after these 2 screws are taken out. Next are 3 screws next to the radiator guard that you need to take out so the side panel can be taken off. I'm filming this on a lift so that I don't have the option of turning my wheel, but if you're doing it on the ground it's much easier if you can turn the handlebars so that the wheel gets out of the way. Also, please note that sometimes it's an odd angle that I'm working at. That's to accommodate the filming. Also, I don't show taking it out, but there's this one last screw at the bottom that needs to be removed as well. Next, we need to remove this push pin. Lift the pin up a little bit so that you can get some pliers up underneath it, and then just pull the pin straight out. Next, reach behind it and just push out the pin. You can take it all the way out so you don't drop it. 2 more screws on the outside of the panel. Be careful when you take out the last screw, as the panel may fall, and you can just gently pop it out. Now to remove the upper side panels. There's 2 screws on top and a few more on the sides. One screw on the top of the beak that needs to be removed. I'm showing the side panel, but if you're going to remove the beak first, this makes sense to take out also. If you're not removing the beak, you'll need to lift it slightly so that you can get this screw out so you can take the side panel off. This is the last side panel screw. Be careful, the side panel will try to fall off if you're not holding it when you get this one out. Now for the beak removal. Top and side screws on each side need to come out first. Here you can see where that background noise is coming from. It was hot in the garage. Remove these 2 screws from underneath, of course D25 Torx, and you'll be ready to pull the beak off. You'll need to tweak both sides up a little bit to clear the turn signals and the other body parts. Then you can pull it off. Now you can pull the beak off. Don't worry, it's flexible, but it's not delicate. Now it's time to remove the tank. First we're going to pull off the mounting plate. Speed T40 Torx on top, T30 Torx on the bottom. Not too difficult to remove. These bushings have to come out to remove the mounting plate. Just lever them up a little bit and then you can pull them out with your fingers. Once those are out, the mounting block pulls out of the way. Note that it's still attached to the wiring. You can disconnect it if you want, but it'll just lay there out of the way. Next, you lift the tank up and turn it a little bit to gain access to all the other components. You'll need to take off the vent tubes first. This bike has keyless, so the keyless wiring needs to be disconnected. You have to come forward with it, trim off all the zip ties, and then once you get to the plug you can disconnect it and pull the plug loose from the frame. Know where all these zip ties come loose. I don't take them out until I'm ready to put new ones back in. That way I can see where they came from. Here's a still shot of what it looks like when it's fully assembled. Use a pointed pick or a very thin screwdriver to lift up the tab so that you can disconnect the wiring. Now use a small screwdriver and just pry that away from the frame. It'll pop right off and it'll pop right back on later. Make sure the vent tubes are off on each side of the cap. Also make sure that the wiring for the cap is loose. Now we're going to take off the fuel line. There's a little button you can push on it. You just push down and it pops out. You'll lose a little bit of fuel, but it's not a big deal. Now we're going to remove the two wires that you see here. You'll need that pointed pick again to slip in under those little tabs and pull those plugs loose. Here you can see the process. Once you lift the little tab, they pop out pretty easily. They go back in even easier. Once you're done with that, the tank lifts off nice and easy. Real easy to do. Make sure you don't have too much gas in it. Now we reverse the process by installing the tank and all the other components and body panels. Lift the tank, slide it into place. There's two little notches on each side that fall into place. You'll be able to see exactly where they go. But first you got to put the wiring in, make sure they're firmly attached, and then you have to put in the fuel line. Now you need to line up the rubber mounts on the frame to the plastic cups that are on the tank itself. You can see right here where it goes in. Once you get it lined up, it slides right into place and it's pretty obvious that you have it done right. Also, the back will drop down flush where it's supposed to be. Now it's time to reconnect the two vent lines, one on each side. And if you have keyless, now you need to run the wire back over towards the front again. Now you get to find where you had all those zip ties before. If you didn't take them off, you can see them there. Zip tie it back in place in the same locations it was before. Put your plugs together and you're good to go. Once you get the two plugs together, it just pushes back into the holes that are in the headlight frame.
Zip tie that back together.
Now we'll reinstall the tank mount. Put it back in place, make sure everything lines all up. Then you're going to put the two bushings back in the front ones. This is where the T40 bolts go. Always start your bolt by hand first, just in case, so you don't cross-thread it. I usually use some kind of a tool to make it a little bit easier. Finger tight first, and then Torx them if you want. Just to make sure you got everything right, it's a good idea to start the bike before you do any more body panel installation. Now let's install the upper tank panel. Get it lined up and put at least one top screw in place, or you can put both in place. A word about bodywork screws. There are two types. There's no shank and then there are shank. The no shank go in the smaller hole, whereas the shank will go in a larger hole. No shank will also go in a round hole. If you haven't sorted your screws, pay attention when you install them. Follow along while we install the rest of the screws on the side panels. Note the proper torque is about 8 Newton meters, but I only do it finger tight using a screwdriver. You don't have to put too much into it or you'll crush the plastics. Install the first part of the push pin into the plastic and then put it into the mount. Then you'll push the pin itself into the middle of that and that'll snug it down. Now we install the beak. Note that there's lights there in the way, so you have to make sure you twist the bodywork around it so that it doesn't get jammed up or scratch the bodywork. In addition to the screws that hold on the beak, there are two areas where you need to push it on. They have little rubber bushings. You can see where they fit too. These need to make sure you get them lined up straight. Especially with light mounts in the way, it can be a little bit fiddly to get it on. Just take your time and it'll press in. You'll know when it's right because it'll lock in correctly and all the screw holes will line up. Now just reinstall all the screws for the beak. Make sure the screw underneath that beak section there is in place before you put this next screw in. As I've mentioned, all of the body screws are T25 Torx except for the center top of the top tank panel. The lower side panel has a little clip that you need to make sure you line up. You can see right here the hole and then the little metal clip that it lines up to. Once lined up, a gentle tap will suit it. Remember to check to see if these are shank or no shank screws that go in these holes. Remember, I'm only showing the one side. Both sides are done the exact same way. For both sides, remember to install all 3 screws that are adjacent to the radiator. These are, of course, T25s. Again, in the interest of filming, I did this at kind of an awkward angle, so it's not nearly as difficult as it looks. These side panels lock into place using these 2 tabs in these 2 slots. And then the 2 screws at the back. Install the other side the same way. The center tank panel just snaps into place. Do it front to back. that easy. 2 lower tank panel screws, of course T25 Torx, slightly snug down. Next, the upper 3 tank panel screws. The center one is a T30 Torx. Also, the T30 Torx on the top can be used for the tank bag mount. Another tip, this little ratchet that I'm using is made specifically for these little bits. It's about $8 at AutoZone. The top beak screws are no shank T25 Torx. This completes the tank cover installation. Now on to the rear cover. Each of the rear cover bolts will be installed using blue Loctite. Make sure all the right length bushings and bolts are in their proper place before you put this down. Also, finger start each of the bolts to make sure you don't cross thread them. Each of these are T40 Torx, torqued to 19 Newton meters. Use blue Loctite on each one, just 1 drop each.
All squared?
A cordless impact wrench makes this much easier. Make sure you double check the torque when you're done though. When installing the tail rack, if you don't have the reinforcement piece, you'll have a bushing that goes in place of this part right here. It'll go right in the back where the bolts come through. Again, finger tighten or finger start them before you tighten them down.
No one ever had it hit it with power until you're sure it started correctly. Or you'll be wishing you had.
The rear T40 Torx are hidden in these little pockets, torqued down to 19 Newton meters. The front T40 Torx also 19 Newton meters.
Make sure they're clear in the back.
Once again, go back and make sure that they're all properly torqued.
Told you goes together fast.
And finally, to complete, we reinstall the seat.
Easy to catch your finger in there. Oh, you got it. There you go. Go ahead and lift the seat up. Okay, back one.
I hope you found this useful. Check out my website for more videos. And thanks to Will Willis for letting me take his bike apart and put it back together.